The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 12 different species gathered around the crystalline conference table. Ambassador Zekthai of the Vorthak Empire leaned forward, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he addressed the assembly. "The humans have requested permission to establish a colony on Kythera Prime," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of grave concern. "I must strongly advise against this decision." A collective murmur rippled through the chamber. The Kythera system had been quarantined for over 3 centuries, ever since the first expedition had encountered what the galaxy's most experienced xenobiologists could only describe as the perfect predator. Chancellor Morden of the Hegemony Council raised her scaled hand. "Ambassador Zekthai, while we respect the Vorthak Empire's extensive experience with dangerous worlds, the humans have proven remarkably adaptable. Their terraforming technology is among the most advanced we've encountered." Adaptable? Zekthai's mandibles clicked in what could only be interpreted as bitter amusement. "Chancellor, you speak of adaptation as if it were merely a matter of adjusting atmospheric processors or modifying soil composition. Kythera Prime is not simply another hostile environment. It is home to the Nethys." The name alone caused several delegates to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Even species that had never personally encountered the creatures knew the stories. The Nethys were living nightmares that had evolved on a world where being the apex predator meant more than just having sharp teeth and quick reflexes. Dr. Yolandra of the Scientific Consortium cleared her throat, her tentacles nervously intertwining. "Perhaps we should review the specifications for those who may not be familiar with the Kythera situation." A holographic display materialized above the table, showing a 3-dimensional model of a creature that seemed to defy conventional understanding of biological possibility. The Nethys stood roughly 4 meters tall at the shoulder, its body a fusion of reptilian scales and chitinous armor plating that could deflect energy weapons. 6 powerful limbs ended in claws capable of rending through starship hull plating, while its elongated head housed rows of crystalline teeth that could bite through reinforced steel. The Nethys possesses several unique characteristics that make it particularly dangerous, Dr. Yolandra continued, highlighting different aspects of the creature's anatomy. Its nervous system processes information at a rate that allows it to perceive and react to threats at superhuman speeds. The creature's hide secretes a paralytic toxin through specialized pores, making even glancing contact potentially fatal. Ambassador Trell UX of the Merchant Alliance tapped his datapad nervously. "What about the pack behavior? Surely that's the most concerning aspect." "Indeed," the doctor confirmed. "Nethys hunt in coordinated groups of up to 20 individuals. They demonstrate tactical intelligence that rivals most sapient species. Previous encounters suggest they can anticipate enemy movements, set elaborate traps, and even manipulate their environment to create advantages." The hologram shifted to show footage from the last expedition to Kythera Prime, recorded by automated drones before the research team was lost. The images showed Nethys moving through dense jungle terrain with fluid grace, their movements perfectly synchronized as they tracked something beyond the camera's range. The Xerion Imperial Navy lost 3 full battalions attempting to establish a research station on Kythera Prime. Zekthai continued, his voice heavy with the weight of memory. These were not inexperienced soldiers, but veterans who had successfully pacified dozens of hostile worlds. The Nethys eliminated them in less than 6 standard hours. Chancellor Morden studied the holographic display with calculating eyes. Yet the humans have specifically requested Kythera Prime, despite being informed of these dangers. Their representative, Captain Sarah Chen, seemed remarkably confident during the preliminary discussions. Human confidence has proven to be both their greatest strength and their most dangerous weakness, observed Ambassador Quintor of the Stellar Federation. His species had more extensive contact with humans than most, having shared several border territories with the rapidly expanding Terran Republic. They have a tendency to underestimate threats while simultaneously overestimating their own capabilities. Dr. Yolandra manipulated the hologram to show historical data from human colonial efforts. To be fair, their track record is impressive. The humans have successfully established colonies on 47 worlds that other species had deemed unsuitable for habitation. Their biological adaptability and technological innovation have allowed them to thrive in environments ranging from high radiation zones to planets with toxic atmospheres. But they've never faced Anything like the Nethys, Zekthai insisted. These creatures represent the culmination of millions of years of evolution on a world where only the most perfectly adapted predators could survive. They've eliminated every species that has attempted to establish a presence on Cathara Prime. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered the implications. The human request wasn't unprecedented, but it was certainly ambitious. The Terran Republic had gained membership in the Galactic Council only 50 standard years ago, making them one of the newest additions to the interstellar community. Their rapid technological advancement and aggressive expansion had earned them both respect and concern among established civilizations. What specific preparations have the humans proposed for dealing with the Nethys threat? Asked Chancellor Morden. Ambassador Quintor consulted his datapad. Captain Chen provided only general assurances about their military capabilities and adaptive technologies. She seemed particularly confident in their ability to establish what she termed peaceful coexistence with the native wildlife. Several delegates exchanged glances that ranged from skeptical to openly incredulous. The concept of peaceful coexistence with creatures that had never shown anything but lethal aggression toward off-world visitors seemed naive at best. The humans may be overconfident, Dr. Yolandra observed, but they're not generally suicidal. Their species has survived and thrived in a remarkably short time since achieving spaceflight. Perhaps they possess knowledge or capabilities that we haven't fully appreciated. Zekthai's mandibles clicked dismissively, or perhaps they simply don't understand what they're proposing to face. The Nethys aren't merely dangerous animals that can be avoided or contained. They're intelligent hunters that adapt their tactics based on their prey. Every failed expedition has taught them something new about off-world technology and combat techniques. The debate continued for several more hours, with delegates presenting arguments both for and against approving the human request. Some pointed to humanity's impressive track record of successful colonization efforts, while others emphasized the unprecedented danger posed by the Nethys. As the session drew to a close, Chancellor Morden called for a preliminary vote to gauge the Council's sentiment. The results were mixed, with 6 species supporting the human request and 6 opposing it. The decision would ultimately require further deliberation and possibly additional consultation with xenobiological experts and military advisors. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Ambassador Zekthai couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to witness either humanity's greatest triumph or their most spectacular failure. The Nethys had been waiting on Cathara Prime for centuries, and soon they would have new prey to test their deadly skills against. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Pathfinder, watching the green and blue marble of Cathara Prime grow larger in the main view screen. Behind her, the colonial fleet maintained perfect formation, 12 heavy transport vessels carrying everything needed to establish humanity's newest frontier settlement. Final systems check complete, Captain, reported Commander Torres from the navigation station. All ships report ready for orbital insertion. Sarah nodded, her expression calm despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. The Galactic Council had eventually approved their colonization request, though not without considerable debate and numerous warnings about the dangers they would face on the planet's surface. Any sign of the Nethys from orbital scans? She asked. Dr. Marcus Webb, the expedition's chief xenobiologist, looked up from his sensor array. The creatures seemed to avoid open areas during daylight hours. We're detecting movement patterns consistent with large predators in the dense jungle regions, but nothing approaching the landing sites we've selected. The landing strategy had been carefully planned over months of preparation. Rather than attempting to establish a single large settlement, the human colonists would create multiple smaller outposts connected by underground tunnel systems. Each site had been chosen for its defensive advantages and distance from known Nethys territory. Dr. Webb, remind me about the intelligence assessments, Sarah requested, though she had memorized every detail of the briefings. The Nethys demonstrate problem-solving abilities equivalent to a sapient species, Webb replied, pulling up holographic displays of the creature's behavioral patterns. They use tools, coordinate complex hunting strategies, and appear capable of learning from previous encounters. What makes them particularly dangerous is their perfect fusion of intelligence and predatory instincts. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the expedition's military advisor, added his perspective from the tactical station. Previous encounters suggest they view any off-world presence as either prey or territorial threat. There's no recorded instance of them showing anything resembling peaceful behavior toward visitors. Sarah studied the tactical data scrolling across her personal display. The military preparations for this expedition had been extensive, incorporating lessons learned from every previous failed attempt to establish a presence on Kythera Prime. Advanced sensor networks, automated defense systems, and weapons specifically designed to penetrate Nethys armor plating. "What about the new containment protocols?" she asked. "Fully implemented across all landing sites," Hayes confirmed. "Each outpost is equipped with sonic barriers calibrated to frequencies that should discourage Nethys approach. We've also deployed pheromone dispensers loaded with territorial markers from apex predators on other worlds." Dr. Webb looked skeptical. "Captain, while these precautions are certainly better than what previous expeditions attempted, we should remember that the Nethys have had centuries to study off-world technology. They may have developed countermeasures we haven't anticipated." "Understood, Doctor. But we're not just relying on technology to protect us." Sarah activated a communication channel to address the entire fleet. "All vessels, this is Captain Chen. In 30 minutes, we begin the most challenging colonization effort in human history. You all know the risks and you all volunteered anyway. That tells me everything I need to know about our chances of success." She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. These weren't reckless adventurers seeking glory, but experienced professionals who had carefully considered the dangers they would face. The colonial fleet carried some of humanity's most innovative scientists, engineers, and survival specialists. "The galaxy expects us to fail," Sarah continued. "They've told us repeatedly that no species has ever successfully established a permanent presence on Kythera Prime. They're probably right to be skeptical, but they don't understand what makes humans different." Commander Torres smiled from his station. "And what makes us different, Captain?" "We don't just adapt to hostile environments," Sarah replied. "We make them less hostile. We don't just survive among dangerous predators. We find ways to coexist with them. The Nethys may be perfect killers, but we're perfect survivors." The first landing shuttles launched from the transport vessels, carrying advance teams to establish preliminary base camps. Each shuttle was equipped with state-of-the-art defensive systems and crewed by volunteers who understood they might not survive. The first day on the planet's surface, Dr. Webb monitored the descent through his sensor array. Shuttles are maintaining optimal trajectories. No sign of Nethys activity in the immediate landing zones. "That could be good or bad news," Hayes observed. "Either they're not aware of our presence yet, or they're studying our approach patterns before making their move." The lead shuttle touched down in a clearing surrounded by dense jungle vegetation. Within minutes, automated systems began establishing a defensive perimeter, while the human crew started unloading essential equipment. Similar operations commenced at 5 other locations across the continent. "Base Camp Alpha reporting successful landing," came the voice of Colonel Martinez through the communication system. "Beginning immediate fortification procedures." Sarah watched the surface operations through live video feeds from each landing site. The efficiency and speed of the human teams was impressive, but she knew that the real test would come when the Nethys decided to investigate these new arrivals. "Dr. Webb, what's our timeline before we can expect first contact with the creatures?" "Based on previous encounters, the Nethys typically investigate new arrivals within 12 to 72 hours, Webb replied. "They seem to prefer observing potential threats before engaging, which suggests they're capable of tactical patience." 12 hours, Sarah mused. "That should give us enough time to establish basic defensive positions and sensor networks." The afternoon passed quickly as the colonial teams worked to transform their landing sites into secure outposts. Underground bunkers were excavated, sensor arrays deployed, and communication networks established. Every colonist understood that their survival depended on perfect execution of carefully rehearsed procedures. As evening approached on Kythera Prime, the jungle around the human settlements began to show signs of life. Thermal sensors detected movement patterns that suggested large creatures moving through the dense vegetation, staying just beyond visual range of the newly established camps. "Captain," Dr. Webb called out, his voice tense with concentration, "we're getting readings that match Nethys biosignatures. Multiple contacts, maintaining distance, but definitely observing our positions." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment they had all been preparing for. First contact with the most dangerous predators in known space. The next few hours would determine whether humanity's ambitious colonization effort would succeed or become another cautionary tale about the limits of expansion into hostile territory. All stations. Implement Protocol 7, she ordered. Full defensive readiness, but no aggressive actions unless directly threatened. Let's see what these creatures are planning. In the jungle surrounding Base Camp Alpha, 6 pairs of crystalline eyes watched the strange new arrivals with calculating intelligence. The Nethys had been waiting centuries for new prey to test their evolved hunting skills against, and these creatures looked particularly interesting. The attack came at dawn, just as Dr. Webb had predicted. The Nethys moved through the jungle with perfect coordination, their approach so silent that only the most sensitive motion detectors caught their advance. Colonel Martinez watched the tactical display in Base Camp Alpha's command center, counting at least 8 distinct heat signatures converging on their position. Contact in 30 seconds, he announced to his team. Remember, these things are smart. Stick to defensive positions and let our technology do the work. The first Nethys emerged from the tree line like a living nightmare, its 4-meter frame moving with predatory grace despite its massive size. The creature's crystalline teeth gleamed in the morning sunlight as it studied the human, fortifications with obvious intelligence, sonic barriers activating, reported Sergeant Kim from the Defense Control Station. High-frequency sound waves filled the air around the camp, calibrated to frequencies that should cause discomfort to creatures with the Nethys auditory sensitivity. The lead Nethys paused, tilting its head as if considering the invisible barrier. Then, to everyone's surprise, it reached into the undergrowth and retrieved what appeared to be a large piece of organic material, probably tree bark. The creature held the material against its auditory organs, effectively creating makeshift protection against the sonic deterrent. They're adapting to our countermeasures in real time, Dr. Webb observed from the Orbital Command Center. That level of problem-solving ability is remarkable. The Nethys continued their approach, now protected against the sonic barriers. Automated defense turrets activated, targeting the creatures with energy beams designed to penetrate their armored hides. The first shot struck the lead Nethys, causing it to stumble but not fall. Instead of retreating, the creature studied the smoking crater in its armor plating with what could only be described as academic interest. It called out to its packmates using a series of complex vocalizations that the translation computers couldn't decipher. They're sharing tactical information, Colonel Martinez realized with growing concern. Each one that gets hit is teaching the others how to avoid our weapons. The Nethys spread out, approaching from multiple angles while using the jungle terrain to break targeting locks. Their movements showed clear understanding of the human's defensive capabilities and limitations. When the next wave of energy beams fired, several creatures managed to dodge entirely. "Sir, recommend implementing Protocol 9, suggested Sergeant Kim. Martinez nodded grimly. Protocol 9 involved revealing one of humanity's most closely guarded tactical innovations, adaptive artificial intelligence integrated with defensive systems. The base's computer network began analyzing Nethys movement patterns in real time, predicting their behavior and adjusting countermeasures accordingly. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Energy turrets began anticipating Nethys movements, placing shots where the creatures would be rather than where they currently were. The pack's coordinated advance faltered as their tactical advantages were neutralized by superior pattern recognition. But the Nethys proved just as adaptable as the humans had feared. After several minutes of ineffective assault, the pack leader issued another series of complex vocalizations. The creatures immediately changed tactics, abandoning their coordinated approach in favor of completely random movement patterns. Incredible, Dr. Webb breathed. They understand that our systems are predicting their behavior, so they're deliberately acting unpredictably. The battle continued for nearly 2 hours, with both sides continuously adapting their strategies in response to each other's innovations. The Nethys demonstrated tool use, environmental manipulation, and tactical flexibility that exceeded even the most optimistic projections of their intelligence. Finally, as the morning sun climbed higher, the pack leader called a retreat. The Nethys withdrew into the jungle as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving the human defenders exhausted but victorious. Damage report, Martinez called out. Defensive systems at 60% efficiency, reported Kim. Several turrets damaged but still functional. No casualties. The colonel activated his communication link to the orbital command center. Captain Chen, first contact concluded. We held our position, but these creatures are everything the warning suggested and more. Sarah's voice came through clearly. Understood, Colonel. Are you confident in your ability to maintain defensive positions? Short term, yes. Long term. Martinez paused, considering his words carefully. Captain, these things learn fast. Really fast. Each engagement is going to be more difficult than the last as they figure out our capabilities. From his position at the sensor array, Dr. Webb was studying the data collected during the attack. Captain, I'm seeing behavioral patterns that suggest the Nethys weren't trying to overrun our position. This felt more like a reconnaissance mission. Explain. They probed our defenses systematically, testing different approaches and countermeasures. When they had sufficient data, they withdrew. I believe they're developing a comprehensive understanding of our technology before launching a more serious assault. The implications were sobering. If the Nethys were conducting battlefield reconnaissance with the same systematic approach that a sapient military force might use, the human colonies faced a far more sophisticated threat than anyone had anticipated. All base camps. Report status, Sarah ordered. One by one, the colonial outposts confirmed similar encounters. Each had faced probing attacks from Nethys packs, and each had successfully defended their positions using various combinations of technology and tactics. But the creatures had withdrawn in every case after gathering sufficient intelligence about human capabilities. They're coordinating across multiple locations, Dr. Webb realized. The attacks were too similar and too well timed to be coincidental. These creatures are sharing information between different packs. Commander Torres looked up from his navigation station. Captain, we're receiving a priority communication from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Zekthai is requesting an immediate status update. Sarah sighed. She had expected the Council to monitor their progress closely, but she had hoped for more time to establish their presence before dealing with political pressure from skeptical alien governments. Put him through. The Vorthak ambassador's image appeared on the main screen, his forearms gesturing with obvious agitation. Captain Chen, we've been monitoring energy discharges from your landing sites. Are you under attack? We've had initial contact with the Nethys, Sarah replied diplomatically. The situation is under control. Under control? Zekthai's mandibles clicked with what might have been disbelief. Captain, these creatures eliminated 3 full battalions of experienced Zerion soldiers. How can you possibly consider the situation under control? Because we're not trying to eliminate them, Ambassador. We're trying to coexist with them. The alien's expression suggested he found this concept either naive or insane. Captain, the Nethys have never shown anything resembling peaceful behavior toward off-world visitors. They are perfect predators with no interest in coexistence. Then maybe it's time someone tried a different approach. Sarah replied calmly, as if summoned by her words. Dr. Webb suddenly called out from his station. Captain, you need to see this. We're getting readings from Base Camp Delta that don't match any previous Nethys behavior patterns. Sarah turned her attention to the new data, unaware that her next decision would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about both humans and the most dangerous predators in known space. Base Camp Delta had been established in a river valley, chosen for its natural defensive advantages and proximity to fresh water sources. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the camp's xenobiologist, was reviewing the morning's encounter data when her assistant rushed into the command bunker. Dr. Vasquez, you need to come see this immediately, called out research technician James Park, his voice tight with excitement and concern. Elena followed James to the camp's observation deck, where a small crowd of colonists had gathered around the perimeter sensors. What she saw through the enhanced optical viewers made her question everything she thought she knew about Nethys behavior. A single Nethys sat at the edge of the clearing, roughly 50 meters from the camp's defensive perimeter, but this creature wasn't displaying any of the predatory behavior patterns documented in previous encounters. Instead, it appeared to be engaged in what could only be described as play. The massive predator was manipulating objects in its environment with obvious curiosity rather than hunting instinct. It had collected several different types of jungle vegetation and was arranging them in geometric patterns on the ground. When it completed each arrangement, the creature would study its work for several minutes before dismantling it and creating something new. How long has it been there? Elena asked. About 30 minutes, James replied. It showed up shortly after the others withdrew from the morning's reconnaissance. But this one's behavior is completely different. Elena activated her recording equipment and began documenting the unusual encounter. The Nethys seemed aware of the human observers but showed no signs of aggression or territorial behavior. If anything, it appeared to be deliberately positioning itself where it could be easily seen. "Dr. Vasquez," called out Corporal Anderson from the defense station, "should we maintain targeting locks?" "Negative," Elena replied without hesitation. "This creature isn't exhibiting threatening behavior. I want to see what it does next." The Nethys continued its artistic endeavors for another hour, creating increasingly complex patterns with the available materials. Its movements were precise and deliberate, suggesting significant cognitive processing behind each decision. When it had exhausted the natural materials in its immediate area, the creature stood and walked closer to the human perimeter. "It's approaching the sonic barriers," James observed nervously, but instead of testing the barriers or attempting to circumvent them, the Nethys stopped and began making a series of low-frequency vocalizations. The sounds were unlike anything in the existing database of Nethys communications, less aggressive and more complex in their tonal variations. Elena's translation software worked frantically to analyze the vocalizations, but the patterns didn't match any known linguistic structures. "James, are you recording all of this?" "Every second, Doctor." The creature continued its vocalizations for several minutes, occasionally pausing as if waiting for a response. When none came, it changed its approach entirely. The Nethys began creating visual patterns in the dirt using its massive claws, drawing geometric shapes and symbols with remarkable precision. "It's trying to communicate," Elena realized with growing excitement. "This isn't random behavior. It's attempting to establish some form of contact protocol." Corporal Anderson looked skeptical. "Doctor, with respect, this could be some kind of trap. Maybe it's trying to lure us out of our defensive positions. Then it's using a completely unprecedented strategy," Elena replied. "Everything in the behavioral database suggests Nethys are direct predators. They don't use deception or misdirection in their hunting patterns." The creature completed its drawings and stepped back, obviously waiting for some kind of response from the humans. Elena made a decision that would either revolutionize human-Nethys relations or get her killed. "I'm going out there," she announced. "Doctor, I can't allow that," Anderson protested. Captain Chen's orders were clear about maintaining defensive positions. "This is a first contact situation, Corporal. As the senior xenobiologist, I have authority to make diplomatic decisions in the field." Elena began suiting up in protective gear designed to counter Nethys toxins. Besides, if this creature wanted to kill us, it wouldn't need to trick us into leaving our bunker. Against his better judgment, Anderson allowed Elena to proceed. She stepped through the sonic barriers, becoming the first human to voluntarily approach a Nethys at close range. The creature watched her advance with obvious interest, but remained perfectly still. When Elena reached the edge of the drawings, she stopped and studied the geometric patterns. They were clearly intentional communications, though their meaning remained unclear. She pulled out a portable tablet and began creating her own simple drawings, basic mathematical concepts and geometric shapes that might serve as a foundation for communication. The Nethys observed her work with what appeared to be fascination. When Elena completed a simple sequence showing the numbers 1 through 5, the creature immediately created its own version using claw marks in the dirt. But its sequence continued beyond 5, demonstrating mathematical concepts that Elena didn't immediately recognize. "James, are you getting this?" she called back to the observation post. "Recording everything, Doctor. The mathematical concepts it's showing are sophisticated." The communication session continued for over 2 hours, with both species exchanging increasingly complex information. The Nethys demonstrated understanding of advanced mathematical principles, spatial relationships, and even basic physics concepts. More importantly, it showed clear signs of emotional intelligence, patience, curiosity, and what might have been genuine pleasure at successful communication. When the creature finally prepared to leave, it created one final drawing in the dirt. The image showed the human camp and the surrounding jungle, with small symbols representing both humans and Nethys positioned throughout the area. But instead of showing conflict between the two species, the drawing depicted them occupying different but overlapping territories. "It's proposing coexistence," Elena breathed. This creature is offering to share the territory rather than fight for it. The Nethys stood and backed away from the communication site, maintaining eye contact with Elena until it reached the jungle tree line. Just before disappearing into the vegetation, it made one final vocalization, a complex sound that the translation software tentatively identified as expressing positive intention. Elena returned to the base camp with her mind racing. Everything the galaxy believed about Nethys behavior was based on encounters where off-world visitors had immediately adopted defensive or aggressive postures. No one had ever attempted peaceful contact, assuming the creatures were incapable of anything beyond predatory instincts. Dr. Vasquez, to Orbital Command, she called through the communication system. I need to speak with Captain Chen immediately. Sarah's voice came through clearly. Go ahead, Doctor. Captain, I've just concluded a successful communication session with a Nethys. These creatures aren't just intelligent predators. They're fully sapient beings capable of complex reasoning and peaceful interaction. The silence from the Orbital Command Center stretched for nearly a minute before Sarah responded. Doctor, are you certain about this assessment? Absolutely certain, Captain. This creature demonstrated mathematical knowledge, artistic ability, and clear communication skills. More importantly, it proposed a territorial sharing arrangement rather than demanding our withdrawal or attempting to eliminate us. From his monitoring station on the orbital platform, Dr. Webb was reviewing the recorded data from Elena's encounter. Captain, the behavioral analysis confirms Dr. Vasquez's assessment. This Nethys displayed cognitive abilities consistent with sapient intelligence. Commander Torres looked up from his communication console. Captain, we're receiving another priority transmission from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Zekthai is demanding an immediate explanation for the extended energy signatures from your landing sites. Sarah considered her options. If Elena's assessment was correct, humanity had just made first contact with a previously unknown sapient species. The political implications were staggering, especially given the galaxy's assumptions about Nethys intelligence and behavior. Put the ambassador through, she decided. It's time the Galactic Council learned something new about the creatures they've been afraid of for centuries. Ambassador Zekthai's image flickered to life on the main screen, his forearms gesturing with barely contained agitation. Behind him, Captain Chen could see other Galactic Council members gathering in what appeared to be an emergency session. Captain Chen, the Vorthak ambassador began without preamble. We've been monitoring unusual energy patterns from your colony sites. Our military advisors are concerned that you may be preparing weapons of mass destruction in response to Nethys attacks. Sarah exchanged glances with Dr. Webb before responding. Ambassador, we're not preparing weapons. We've made a discovery that changes everything we thought we knew about the Nethys. What kind of discovery? Interjected Chancellor Morden, her scaled features showing skepticism. The Nethys aren't just intelligent predators, Sarah explained. They're a fully sapient species capable of complex reasoning, mathematical understanding, and peaceful communication. Dr. Vasquez successfully established contact with one of them less than an hour ago. The silence from the council chamber was profound. Ambassador Zekthai's mandibles clicked rapidly, and what Sarah had learned was a sign of extreme agitation or disbelief. Captain, Zekthai finally managed. The Nethys have killed thousands of individuals from multiple species over the past 3 centuries. Are you suggesting that we've been dealing with a species capable of rational diplomacy this entire time? Dr. Webb stepped forward to address the council. Ambassador, our analysis suggests that previous encounters were shaped by the approaching species' expectations and defensive postures. Every previous expedition treated the Nethys as dangerous animals to be contained or eliminated. No one ever attempted peaceful contact. Dr. Yilandra of the Scientific Consortium leaned into view, her tentacles writhing with obvious excitement. Dr. Webb, are you saying that the Nethys only respond with aggression when they perceive threats to their territory? That's exactly what we're suggesting, Sarah confirmed. Dr. Vasquez's encounter demonstrates that individual Nethys are capable of complex communication and even territorial negotiation. They may have been defending their world from what they perceived as invasive threats. Ambassador Quintor of the Stellar Federation raised a valid concern. Captain, even if some Nethys are capable of peaceful interaction, that doesn't explain the coordinated military-style attacks your own forces experienced this morning. Actually, it does, Dr. Webb replied, pulling up tactical data from the morning's encounters. The attacks were reconnaissance missions designed to assess our capabilities and intentions. They withdrew once they had gathered sufficient intelligence, rather than pressing for total victory. That suggests strategic thinking aimed at long-term coexistence rather than immediate elimination of threats. The implications were staggering. If the Nethys were indeed sapient beings defending their homeworld from perceived invaders, then 3 centuries of galactic policy had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. Dr. Vasquez to Orbital Command, came Elena's voice through the communication system. Captain, I'm receiving another approach from what appears to be the same Nethys that initiated contact earlier. Sarah activated the visual feed from Base Camp Delta, allowing the Galactic Council to observe the encounter in real time. The massive predator emerged from the jungle carrying what appeared to be gifts, crystalline formations that sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. Those are natural art objects, Dr. Yolandra observed with growing amazement. The creature is offering aesthetic gifts as part of a diplomatic exchange. The Nethys approached Elena's position and carefully arranged the crystalline formations and geometric patterns around the communication site established during their earlier encounter. Then it began creating new drawings in the dirt, this time showing multiple human camps connected by what might represent peaceful trade routes. It's proposing expanded diplomatic relations, Elena reported. This creature wants to establish formal communication protocols between our species. Ambassador Zekthai's expression had shifted from skepticism to something approaching wonder. Dr. Vasquez, can you determine whether this individual represents a larger political structure among the Nethys? Elena began creating her own drawings, using simple symbols to ask questions about Nethys social organization. The creature responded by creating increasingly complex diagrams, showing what appeared to be territorial boundaries, family groups, and hierarchical relationships between different Nethys communities. Captain, Elena called out, I'm seeing evidence of sophisticated social structures. This species has organized territories, family units, and what might be regional leadership hierarchies. Dr. Webb was analyzing the communication data in real time. The mathematical concepts being exchanged suggest the Nethys have developed advanced understanding of physics, chemistry, and possibly engineering. They may possess technology we haven't encountered because they've had no reason to deploy it against what they perceived as hostile invaders. The revelation struck the Galactic Council like a thunderbolt. If the Nethys possessed advanced technology and sophisticated social structures, they represented a major galactic civilization that had been completely unknown to the interstellar community. Captain Chen, Chancellor Mordoon said slowly, if your assessment is correct, we may have been inadvertently conducting military operations against a sapient species for 3 centuries. The legal and ethical implications were enormous. Galactic law required formal diplomatic contact attempts before any military action against suspected sapient species. The fact that no one had recognized Nethys intelligence didn't excuse the failure to follow proper first contact protocols. What are you proposing as next steps? Asked Ambassador Quintor. Sarah had been considering this question since Elena's first successful communication. We need to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Nethys leadership and negotiate a proper treaty for human settlement rights. But more importantly, the Galactic Council needs to acknowledge the Nethys as a sapient species, deserving of full diplomatic recognition. That would require completely rewriting 3 centuries of policy regarding Kythera Prime, Zekthai observed. Then that's what we'll do, Sarah replied firmly. The alternative is continuing to treat an intelligent species as dangerous animals, which violates every principle the Galactic Council claims to uphold. The communication session continued for another hour, with Elena successfully establishing increasingly sophisticated exchanges with the Nethys representative. By the end of the encounter, they had developed a basic symbolic language and scheduled future communication sessions. Dr. Vasquez, Sarah called through the communication system, ask our new friend if there are other Nethys leaders who should be involved in formal diplomatic discussions. Elena created the appropriate symbols and waited for a response. The Nethys studied her drawings carefully before creating an elaborate diagram showing what appeared to be a complex political map of Kythera Prime. Different regions were marked with distinct symbols, suggesting multiple Nethys nations or territories. Captain, it looks like we're dealing with a sophisticated planetary civilization rather than a single species group. This creature is indicating that formal diplomatic contact would require representatives from multiple Nethys political entities. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with excited conversation as delegates realized the magnitude of what humanity had discovered. First contact with a previously unknown sapient species was rare enough, but discovering an entire planetary civilization that had been misunderstood for centuries was unprecedented. Captain Chen, Chancellor Morden announced formally, "The Galactic Council hereby authorizes you to serve as preliminary ambassador to the Nethys civilization. We'll need comprehensive cultural and political assessments before formal diplomatic relations can be established." Sarah nodded, accepting the responsibility with appropriate gravity. Humanity had come to Cathera Prime seeking a new colony world, but instead they had discovered something far more valuable, the opportunity to correct 3 centuries of misunderstanding and establish relations with a sophisticated, alien civilization that had been hiding in plain sight. 3 days after first contact, Captain Sarah Chen found herself preparing for the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. The Nethys had agreed to formal negotiations, but only under conditions that demonstrated their sophisticated understanding of interspecies politics. The meeting location was a natural amphitheater deep in the jungle, chosen by the Nethys for its symbolic significance as neutral territory between human settlements and traditional Nethys territories. What surprised the human delegation most was the discovery that this location had been carefully maintained as a ceremonial site, complete with carved stone seating and artistic decorations that rivaled anything created by galactic civilizations. "Dr. Vasquez, are you seeing these architectural details?" Sarah asked through her communication headset as she studied the carved pillars surrounding the amphitheater. "Recording everything, Captain," Elena replied from her position with the advanced survey team. "The level of artistic sophistication suggests the Nethys have been developing their civilization for thousands of years. These aren't primitive territorial markers. They're the work of a mature culture with established aesthetic traditions." Dr. Webb's voice came through from the orbital command center. "Captain, our atmospheric analysis is detecting trace amounts of refined metals in the surrounding area. The Nethys may have deliberately concealed their technological capabilities from previous visitors." The implications were staggering. If the Nethys possessed advanced technology, but had chosen not to deploy it during previous encounters, it suggested a level of restraint and strategic thinking that exceeded the capabilities of most known species. "Ambassador Chen," came a new voice through the communication system. Ambassador Zekthai was monitoring the proceedings from the Galactic Council's emergency observation post. "Are you confident in the security arrangements for this meeting?" Sarah looked around at the defensive positions established by Colonel Martinez's team. Human soldiers were stationed at strategic points around the amphitheater, but their weapons were set to non-lethal settings as a gesture of peaceful intent. "As confident as anyone can be when meeting with creatures we've misunderstood for 3 centuries, Sarah replied diplomatically. The sound of approaching footsteps through the jungle announced the arrival of the Nethys delegation. What emerged from the tree line defied every expectation based on previous encounters. Instead of the solitary predators described in galactic databases, a formal procession of 7 Nethys approached the amphitheater. The lead Nethys was distinguished by elaborate ceremonial markings carved into its armor, plating and crystalline, ornaments that caught the filtered sunlight. Behind it walked 6 others, each displaying different symbols that Elena's growing understanding of Nethys culture suggested represented various political territories or social roles. "They're wearing diplomatic regalia," Elena observed with wonder. "This is a formal state delegation, not a hunting pack." The Nethys procession approached the amphitheater with ceremonial precision, their movements coordinated in what appeared to be a traditional diplomatic protocol. The lead creature, whom Elena had begun thinking of as the primary ambassador, took position at the center of the carved stone platform. When it spoke, the vocalizations were unlike anything recorded from previous Nethys encounters. The sounds were complex, musical, and obviously structured according to sophisticated linguistic rules. Elena's translation software worked frantically to identify patterns, but the language was too advanced for real-time interpretation. Dr. Vasquez, Sarah called out. Any success with translation? Partial success, Captain. I'm identifying what appear to be formal greetings and acknowledgments of diplomatic status. This creature is following established protocols for interspecies contact. Sarah stepped forward, hoping that her own diplomatic training would serve her well in this unprecedented situation. She had prepared a brief statement in the symbolic language developed during Elena's preliminary contacts, expressing humanity's desire for peaceful relations and mutual understanding. Using a portable tablet to display geometric symbols, Sarah began her presentation. The Nethys delegation observed with obvious attention, occasionally exchanging quiet vocalizations among themselves. When she finished, the primary ambassador approached and began creating its own symbols in the ground using precise claw movements. "It's acknowledging our peaceful intentions," Elena translated, "and expressing surprise that we're the first off-world species to attempt genuine diplomatic contact." The primary ambassador continued its symbolic communication, creating increasingly complex diagrams that showed the history of Nethys encounters with galactic civilizations. The images told a story of defensive actions taken against perceived invaders who had never attempted peaceful communication. "Captain," Elena called out with growing excitement, "it's explaining that the Nethys have been protecting their world from what they believed were hostile colonization attempts. They've been waiting for centuries for someone to approach them as equals rather than treating them as animals to be eliminated or contained. The revelation cast 3 centuries of galactic policy in a new and uncomfortable light. The Nethys had been defending their homeworld against what they perceived as unprovoked invasions, while the galactic community had been treating them as dangerous wildlife that prevented legitimate colonization efforts." The primary ambassador gestured to its companions, who stepped forward to present their own communications. Each represented a different aspect of Nethys civilization: territorial governance, technological development, cultural traditions, and what appeared to be military organization. "Dr. Webb," Sarah called to the Orbital Command Center, "are you analyzing the cultural data being shared?" "Fascinating material, Captain. The Nethys appear to have developed a sophisticated federal system with regional autonomy and specialized roles. Their technological representative is showing diagrams of engineering principles that our computers are having difficulty interpreting. The technological Nethys had created drawings showing crystalline structures that might represent advanced energy systems, biological integration techniques that could explain their remarkable physical capabilities, and transportation methods that didn't rely on conventional mechanical principles. They've been watching us, Elena realized as she studied the communications. The technological displays include analysis of human equipment and weapon systems. They've been studying galactic civilizations for centuries while remaining hidden. Ambassador Zekthai's voice crackled through the communication system. "Captain Chen, this information suggests the Nethys have been conducting long-term intelligence gathering on galactic species. Are we dealing with a potential security threat?" Sarah considered the question carefully before responding. "Ambassador, if the Nethys wanted to eliminate galactic presence in their system, they've had centuries to develop the capability. The fact that they've chosen defensive strategies rather than offensive ones suggests they're more interested in protecting their civilization than expanding it." The diplomatic session continued for several hours, with both sides exchanging increasingly detailed information about their respective civilizations. The Nethys demonstrated knowledge of galactic politics, economic systems, and cultural practices that could only have been acquired through systematic observation and analysis. Most remarkably, they expressed specific interest in human approaches to environmental management and species coexistence. The Nethys had apparently been impressed by humanity's track record of successful colonization without complete environmental destruction. "They're proposing a formal treaty," Elena announced after analyzing the latest symbolic communications. "Limited human settlement rights in exchange for technological and cultural exchange agreements." The offer was more generous than anyone had dared hope for. The Nethys were willing to share their homeworld, but only with species that demonstrated respect for existing ecosystems and indigenous rights. "Captain," the primary ambassador's translator managed to vocalize through Elena's equipment, "your species shows wisdom in seeking cooperation rather than conquest. We have watched many civilizations, but yours is the first to approach with open hands rather than closed fists." Sarah felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. Humanity had not just discovered a new sapient species, but had potentially opened the door to an entirely new model of interspecies relations based on mutual respect, rather than territorial dominance. "Primary Ambassador," she replied formally, "humanity is honored by your willingness to consider peaceful coexistence. We believe that both our civilizations can benefit from cooperation and mutual learning." The Nethys delegation conferred among themselves using rapid, complex vocalizations that suggested sophisticated political consultation. After several minutes, the primary ambassador approached Sarah and began creating one final symbolic message. The image showed both species working together to transform Kythera Prime into something greater than either could achieve alone, a shared world where different civilizations could coexist and learn from each other. 6 months after first contact, the transformation of Kythera Prime had exceeded everyone's most optimistic projections. The joint human-Nethys settlement of New Harmony had become a shining example of interspecies cooperation, attracting visitors and researchers from across the galaxy. Captain Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's official ambassador to the Nethys Confederation, stood on the observation deck of the new diplomatic center. Below her, humans and Nethys worked side by side on construction projects that incorporated the best of both civilizations' technologies. "Ambassador," called Dr. Elena Vasquez as she approached with a data tablet, "the latest cultural exchange reports are remarkable. Nethys biotechnology is revolutionizing our medical research, while our computational systems are helping them develop new artistic expression techniques." Sarah smiled as she watched a group of human children learning traditional Nethys mathematics from elderly Confederation educators. The geometric principles that had once seemed alien were now being incorporated into human engineering projects, while Nethys youngsters were discovering human music and literature. "Any word from the Galactic Council about formal recognition?" Sarah asked. "Ambassador Zekthai transmitted the official announcement this morning," Elena replied with obvious satisfaction. "The Nethys Confederation has been granted full membership status and voting rights. They'll be sending their first representative to the council chambers next month." The political transformation had been as dramatic as the cultural one. The galaxy's most feared predators had become its newest diplomatic partners, fundamentally changing interstellar relations. Several species that had previously avoided the Kythera system were now requesting permission to establish research stations and trade agreements. Dr. Webb's voice came through the communication system from the research station orbiting Kythera Prime. "Ambassador, we're receiving visitors for the afternoon demonstration. The Zerion Imperial delegation has arrived, along with representatives from the scientific consortium." Sarah activated the transport to the main demonstration facility, where Nethys engineers were preparing to showcase the technological innovations developed through human-Nethys collaboration. The visiting delegates would witness capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about the limits of biological and mechanical integration. In the demonstration chamber, Primary Ambassador Kethavar, whose name Elena had finally learned to pronounce correctly, stood beside a crystalline structure that hummed with barely contained energy. The device represented the successful fusion of human energy management systems with Nethys biological enhancement techniques. "Honored guests," Kethavar began, speaking through the translation system that had evolved far beyond simple symbolic communication, "we present the result of cooperation between species once thought incompatible." The demonstration was breathtaking. The hybrid technology could enhance biological systems without invasive surgery, extend consciousness across vast distances through quantum entanglement, and even accelerate healing processes that had previously required weeks of recovery time. Ambassador Zekthai watched the proceedings with obvious amazement. "Primary Ambassador, these capabilities could revolutionize medicine across the galaxy. Would the Confederation be willing to share this technology with other species?" "Under appropriate circumstances," Kethavar replied diplomatically. "Our cooperation with humanity has taught us that technology shared responsibly creates benefit for all. However, we have also learned from observing galactic history that advanced capabilities can be misused by species that lack proper ethical frameworks." The implied criticism of previous galactic approaches to technological development was unmistakable. The Nethys had been studying interstellar civilizations for centuries, and their assessment of galactic society was not entirely flattering. Dr. Ylandra of the Scientific Consortium stepped forward. Primary Ambassador, what criteria would the Confederation use to evaluate potential technology-sharing partners? The same criteria humanity met, Kethavar explained. Willingness to approach unknown situations with curiosity rather than aggression. Demonstrated respect for indigenous rights and environmental stewardship. Most importantly, the wisdom to seek cooperation rather than domination when encountering new civilizations. The message was clear. The Nethys Confederation would not automatically share their advanced technologies with species that had poor track records of peaceful expansion and interspecies relations. Sarah received a priority. Communication through her diplomatic channel. Ambassador Chen, this is Colonel Martinez at the Border Monitoring Station. We're detecting approaching vessels that don't match any known galactic registry signatures. Sarah excused herself from the demonstration and activated her mobile command interface. Colonel, what's the nature of these vessels? Unknown configuration, Ambassador. They're broadcasting what appears to be a distress signal, but our translation computers can't interpret the language patterns. The implications were significant. If unknown vessels were approaching Kythera Prime in distress, it represented exactly the kind of first contact situation that had historically led to misunderstandings and conflict. Primary Ambassador, Sarah called to Keithvar, we're receiving reports of unknown vessels approaching your system. They appear to be in distress. Kethavar's crystalline eyes focused with obvious interest. Ambassador Chen, this presents an opportunity to demonstrate the new protocols we have developed for peaceful first contact. Are you willing to coordinate a joint response? Within hours, human and Nethys vessels were approaching the unknown ships using carefully developed first contact procedures. Instead of defensive postures and immediate demands for identification, the joint fleet transmitted mathematical sequences, artistic patterns, and universal symbols of peaceful intent. The response was immediate and encouraging. The unknown vessels began broadcasting their own mathematical sequences, indicating intelligence and willingness to communicate. When the fleets finally made visual contact, they discovered a species of crystalline beings whose ships had suffered critical damage during long-distance travel. This is exactly what we hoped to achieve, Sarah explained to the gathered Galactic Council representatives who were monitoring the first contact procedures. By approaching unknown situations with cooperation rather than suspicion, we can establish peaceful relations instead of defensive conflicts. The rescue and first contact operation became a model for future interspecies encounters. The crystalline beings, who called themselves the Veltar Collective, were successfully integrated into the growing alliance of species centered around Kythera Prime. Ambassador Zekthai transmitted a formal statement to the Galactic Council. The Kythera Prime model of interspecies cooperation has demonstrated capabilities that exceed traditional diplomatic approaches. The Council should consider adopting similar protocols for future first contact situations. As the months passed, Kythera Prime became known throughout the galaxy as the premier destination for species seeking to learn advanced cooperation techniques. The Human-Nethys partnership had evolved into a multi-species alliance that prioritized peaceful exploration and mutual development over territorial expansion and resource competition. Standing on the observation deck of New Harmony as the sun set over the alien landscape, Sarah reflected on how completely their mission had transformed. They had come seeking a new colony world and instead discovered that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their ability to survive in hostile environments. It was their willingness to approach the unknown with open minds and peaceful
intentions, Ambassador,
Elena called out as she joined Sarah on the observation deck. The evening cultural exchange is beginning. Tonight's program features Nethys poetry performed with human musical accompaniment. Sarah smiled as she watched families of different species gathering in the amphitheater below. Human children played alongside young Nethys and Veltar offspring, while their parents discussed collaborative research projects and artistic endeavors. The galaxy had expected humanity to either conquer or be destroyed by the most dangerous predators in known space. Instead, they had discovered that the universe's greatest treasures weren't found through conquest, but through the courage to extend friendship to those who seemed most different from themselves. Dr. Vasquez, Sarah said quietly, I think we've learned something important about what it means to be human in a galaxy full of other intelligent species. What's that, Ambassador? Sometimes the most human thing you can do is help another species become more than they ever thought possible, and let them help you do the same. In the amphitheater below, the evening performance began with a harmony that no single species could have created alone, beautiful precisely because it required multiple voices working together to achieve something greater than any could accomplish in isolation.